The mahogany table in Anderson and Associates law firm had seen its share of family drama. But even Mr. Anderson looked uncomfortable as my 3 siblings presented their documents with practiced confidence. I sat at the far end, the forgotten daughter, watching them divide our father's life into neat little portions. As you can see, my brother Marcus said, sliding papers across the table, everything's been handled. Dad left clear instructions before he died. The house goes to me, the investment portfolio to Janet, and the business properties to Carl. Simple. Clean. Fair. We already split everything, he smirked, showing the papers like a winning poker hand. Sorry you had to drive all this way for nothing, Diane. But Dad was very specific about who gets what. I studied the documents from where I sat, noting the crisp white paper, the too perfect formatting, the signatures that looked like someone had traced them from a photograph. 3 years of taking care of Dad during his illness, and this was my reward, watching my siblings steal everything while playing grieving children. That's interesting, I said, reaching into my bag, the same worn leather bag I'd carried to every hospital appointment, every chemotherapy session, every sleepless night by Dad's bedside. Because I have something here that tells a different story. Janet laughed, that brittle sound I remembered from childhood when she'd blame me for things she'd broken. What? Did you forge a sticky note saying, "Give Diane everything"? Please. We have the official will, notarized and witnessed. Witnessed by who exactly? I asked, pulling out a manila envelope that had lived in my bag for 6 months, waiting for this exact moment. By Dad's friends. From the club, Carl said, but his voice wavered slightly. He'd always been the worst liar of the 4 of us. I stood up slowly, walking to Mr. Anderson's side of the table. May I asked, gesturing to the documents they'd presented. He nodded, clearly sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. I held their will up to the light, then placed it beside the documents from my envelope. Interesting. Dad's real signature looks different. I pointed to the shaky but distinctive way our father signed his name. The elaborate R in Robert, the way he always underlined his last name twice. This signature on your document is perfect. Too perfect for a man whose hands shook from Parkinson's. People can have good days, Marcus started. Also interesting, I continued, that this will is dated March 15th. The same day Dad was in surgery for his liver. I should know I was there, holding his hand in pre-op at 6 a.m., waiting in that horrible yellow chair for 8 hours, sleeping in his room for 3 days after. The silence in the room grew thick. Mr. Anderson leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. But the most interesting thing? I pulled out my phone. Is that Gerald Hoffman and Patrick Stewart, the supposed witnesses, died in 2019 and 2021 respectively. Rather impressive that they managed to witness a will in 2024. Janet's face had gone pale. There must be different people with the same names. At the same country club? With the same member ID numbers that you helpfully included on the notarization. I smiled, but it held no warmth. No, Janet. You just didn't do your homework. You never did like research. That's why you always copied my essays in high school. I laid out the real documents, the ones Dad had given me during a moment of clarity 6 months before he died. His hands had shaken terribly that day, but his mind was sharp as a tack. This is Dad's actual will, I said. Written in 2018, updated in 2023, properly witnessed by his lawyer Martin Brenner and his nurse Sarah Coleman, both of whom are alive and willing to testify. Notarized by the hospital notary, with video recording of the signing per Dad's request. That's fake. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. You're just bitter because you wasted 3 years playing nurse. Playing nurse? The words came out sharp enough to cut. Is that what you call holding him when he cried from pain? Cleaning him when he lost control of his body? Fighting with insurance companies, managing 20 medications, learning to use feeding tubes and oxygen tanks. I turned back to Mr. Anderson. Page 12 of the reel will has something particularly interesting. Dad knew his children well. He included a clause about fraudulent documents. Mr. Anderson read aloud, his voice steady in the charged room. Should any of my children present falsified documents regarding my estate, they shall forfeit all claims to inheritance and face prosecution for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Elder abuse? Carl's voice cracked. We never visited him in 3 years? Never called except to ask about your inheritance? Never helped with a single medical bill while systematically draining his checking account. I pulled out bank statements, highlighted and tabbed. I have everything. Every transfer you made. Every time you used his credit cards. Every withdrawal from accounts you weren't supposed to have access to. You can't prove, Janet started. I can actually. Dad may have been sick, but he wasn't stupid. We installed cameras in his house after money started disappearing. We have footage of Marcus using Dad's computer to transfer funds. Janet taking his checkbook. Carl with his credit cards. I looked at my siblings, these people who shared my blood but had somehow become strangers. 20,000 here, 15,000 there. You bled him dry while he was dying, and I was too busy keeping him alive to stop you. But I documented everything. This is ridiculous. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. We're family. You wouldn't actually. The police will be here in about 10 minutes, I interrupted, checking my watch. I called them before the meeting. Fraud over $50,000 is a felony in this state. Each of you took more than that. You called the police? Janet's voice rose to a shriek. On your own family? You stopped being my family the day you decided Dad's death was a business opportunity, I said. The day you had him sign a DNR when he was drugged and confused. The day you tried to put him in the cheapest nursing home you could find so you could sell his house. We were trying to help. Carl protested. You were trying to help yourselves to his money. There's a difference. I gathered my documents carefully. Mr. Anderson, the real will names you as executor. I trust you'll handle the distribution according to Dad's actual wishes. The elderly lawyer nodded slowly. I'll need to verify these documents, of course, but they appear to be in order. And these allegations of fraud are backed by evidence, I assured him. Bank records, video footage, forged documents. It's all in the folder. A knock on the door interrupted us. 2 uniformed officers entered, their presence making everything suddenly, terrifyingly real for my siblings. We received a call about suspected fraud and forgery, the older officer said. I pointed to the fake will on the table. That document is forged. These 3 presented it claiming it was my father's will, but the witnesses listed are deceased, and the signature is falsified. There's also the matter of elder financial abuse. This is insane. Marcus turned to the officers. She's lying. She's just angry because... Because what, Marcus? I asked quietly. Because I spent 3 years caring for our father while you 3 treated him like an ATM? Because I have power of attorney that you didn't know about? Because Dad trusted me with his real will. The officers began taking statements, examining documents. My siblings' confident facade crumbled as they realized the depth of their mistake. They'd been so sure I was the weak one, the pushover, the one who would accept whatever scraps they threw my way. Dad knew, I said as the officers worked. He knew what you were doing. He could have changed the will to cut you out entirely, but he didn't. He left you each $50,000, enough to show he loved you, not enough to reward your greed. The rest goes to medical research for Parkinson's and the nursing staff who actually cared for him. Everything. Janet's voice was small now. He left everything to charity. Not everything. He left me the house, not to sell, but to live in. He knew I'd need somewhere to go after spending 3 years as his caregiver. And he left me his books, his watch, and a letter. I pulled out the letter, worn from reading. To my daughter Diane, who showed me that love isn't measured in visits or cards, but in presence and sacrifice. You were there when it mattered. That's worth more than any inheritance. The room was quiet except for the scratch of the officers' pens. My siblings looked smaller now, deflated without their stolen fortune to prop them up. The real irony? I said as the officers prepared to take them for processing. If you'd just waited, if you'd shown even a little genuine care, Dad probably would have left you more. But you couldn't wait. You had to take what you wanted while he was still warm. As they were let out, Marcus angry, Janet crying, Carl silent, I felt no satisfaction. Just a deep tiredness and the echo of grief. Not just for Dad, but for the family we could have been if greed hadn't poisoned everything. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat. Ms. Walker, I'll need a few days to verify everything and begin processing the actual will. Take your time, I said. I'm not in a hurry. I've got nowhere else to be. I left the office building and drove to the cemetery. Dad's grave was still fresh, the headstone not yet weathered. I sat on the bench nearby, the one I'd sat on every day for the past month. They showed their true colors, Dad, I whispered. Just like you said they would. I'm sorry it had to end this way. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. You did what was right, not what was easy. That's all I ever wanted. I sat there until the sun began to set, thinking about family and loyalty, about love and greed, about the price of doing the right thing. My siblings would face justice, but I'd lost them long before today. Maybe we'd never really been a family at all, just four people who happened to share DNA and nothing else. But Dad and I, we'd been family in the truest sense. In the hospital rooms and the sleepless nights, in the small victories and the final goodbye. That was worth more than any inheritance. The real documents in my bag had protected Dad's true wishes, but they couldn't bring back the 3 years of loneliness, the weight of being the only one who cared. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ashes. I drove home to the house that was now mine, filled with memories and medical equipment that I'd need to clear out. Tomorrow, I'd start sorting through it all. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in Dad's chair, read one of his books, and remember when family meant something more than money. The police had taken my siblings away, but they'd been gone long before that. The real crime wasn't the forged will. It was the betrayal of a father who would have given them everything if they'd just loved him a little. But that was their loss, not mine. I had my memories, my clear conscience, and the knowledge that when it mattered most, I was there. And sometimes that's all the inheritance you need.